Rachelle Noble, welcome to the LiberatED podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. I can't even tell you.
I'm so excited that you're here. I was able to visit your new microschool, Noble Microschools in Mesa, Arizona, last month in September, and was just thrilled to see what you were doing there in terms of practicing what you preach, because you are the founder of Microschool Solutions, which is a microschool accelerator and incubator program. Helping other entrepreneurial parents and teachers to launch their own microschools in their communities. And you decided to create a home-based microschool of your own and very quickly hit capacity. I think you had about a dozen students when I visited, which was just a couple of weeks into the new academic year. And clearly a joyful learning environment where students are really thriving. So I'm so thrilled to talk with you about your founder journey, both in creating Microschool Solutions and creating your own individual microschools. So thrilled that you're here. So Rachelle, you started in education, you were a charter school teacher, sort of working in more of a conventional classroom environment. Tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
And I was homeschooled. So there was like that back, that played, I think, a part in some of that too. Um, and maybe we'll get to that later, but I think the thing that I have always wanted is for kids to feel seen and which includes being heard and understood, just them to be seen. And so I taught math. I graduated in history, needed a job, reached out to, this was 2003 in the early-ish charter days in Arizona. And my mom knew the principal, and I reached out and I started teaching study hall and then taught geometry and algebra. And being in a traditional environment, but wanting to make it individualized in some ways. Well, and I just wanted to make it fun. Like I just wanted kids to have fun. So we would do things like duel for seats, like if they wanted, the back of the corner was like the prime seats in my classroom, and if they wanted to steal somebody's seats, they could challenge them to a math duel. So just like really silly, but things that made kids want to be in my classroom. I had kids, they'd be like, I love your class, I hate the math, but just them feeling like they were in a place where they were loved. That's always, I think, been what mattered to me the most.
Yeah, so let's go back a little bit then to your experience learning outside of a conventional classroom before you taught in one. When you think back to your experience homeschooling, what comes to mind?
Very rigid. I was in a very rigid homeschool environment, particularly the first few years. My mom was a certified teacher, and this was 1982. I went to kindergarten and first grade public school in a small town. And so it was a big deal when our family with 5 students left the public school system and all that funding left. So there was some pariah like stuff going on there. And but my mom ran school like a school, it was like desks in our basement and uh, very structured and rigid. The thing that I carried from my homeschool days to my teaching days that now I didn't know the term mastery-based learning, um, but we used Abeka books. That was the curriculum she used in the early 80s. And it was like you had X amount of pages to do every day, and you did them and you handed them in and she'd give you back, and she called them corrections. Sometimes you were done at 11 and sometimes it was like 8 at night, but you never moved forward without having all of the content covered. And so in a traditional environment with homework and 150 students every day, it's really, really hard to do that. But one of the biggest problems, I think, is we give kids work, they never look at it again. So they just keep missing the same thing. So trying to get my students to think about like read, like, here, you can get credit, do it over and over again, and you can get all the credit you want. But I think that, so very rigid until she got a little more tired. And then it was like, we weren't in desks, we were on our beds in our pajamas doing our work. But it wasn't, it didn't make me want to homeschool.
Mm.
Interesting. Like my own homeschool experience didn't lead me to wanting to be a homeschool mom.
Yeah, and of course, today you work with homeschooling students across the country. Many of the microschools that you've helped to incubate and to launch that are run individually by independent entrepreneurs are serving homeschoolers. And so, how have you seen homeschooling change from when you were a child who was homeschooled to some of the learners you see in the microschools you support?
Well, I mean, all the resources for one, and then ideology, more access to idea, like what you know, you're the unschooled philosophy. That was not that was not what we were doing. We were doing grade level or above schoolwork, and it wasn't about interest. And so I think came from a generation where kids didn't really get a chance to have opinions. You like did what you were told. And so I talk a lot about the carpenter versus the gardener analogy, where the carpenter idea as a parent or an educator is you get this really beautiful block of wood and your job is to form it into whatever you think it should be, which I would say defines my childhood. I like the gardener mentality where like a child is a seed and they contain everything they need. And my job is to nourish, not to form. And so that I think it's just a shift in the culture that has also been able to happen in the homeschool and microschooling environment. Not that all homeschoolers or microschoolers are doing it that way. I mean, I think there's a lot of carpenters out there. And everyone gets the chance to do that. For me, it's all about how do I maximize, how do I get barriers out of the way that keep kids from becoming their most elevated self?
Yeah, and also, I mean, you talk about the differences in sort of educational philosophies now available to homeschoolers. The overall kind of demographic composition of homeschoolers has changed,
Mhm.
much more reflective of the larger US population. Urban areas, rural areas, secular, faith-based, homeschoolers of color. In fact, during the kind of first crucial year of COVID in 2020, the number of Black homeschoolers increased fivefold, according to Census Bureau data. So, really just a dramatic shift in the homeschooling population. And that's very much what you're supporting, again, as part of your journey with Microschool Solutions and the microschool ecosystem. But when did you decide that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was it just one day you said, I'm going to create Microschool Solutions and help other people launch these programs? Or had you been sort of nurturing an entrepreneurial spirit before that?
That's probably who I am at my core. Um, I didn't, uh, I ran a business in a network marketing company, but that's still not, there's still like parameters around it. So Microschool Solutions is really the first time that I've like stepped into like, and my micro school, because those are, both businesses I'm running. That was the first time I really stepped into entrepreneurship and said, this is mine. I'm in charge of it. This is what I want to do. Um, so it is, I think, in who I am. Um, but I don't know if I didn't ever like take the leap,
Yeah.
I I follow like you just get a job,
Yeah.
or not, but that's what I did. I wasn't buying stuff, building stuff. I was just working for other people.
So what changed that led you to launch Microschool Solutions?
Um I was at Prenda previously. I was early days, and when that my time there ended in September of 2022, and I had just gotten divorced and I had a divorce settlement that uh and I love this movement. Like I love this movement like I've never loved anything outside of humans, but it's because of the humans, like that's
Mhm.
what drives me. And when you talk about Black founders, like particularly making a difference for people that can change kids' lives in ways that like there's no other option that is going to change things for them. Um, and I'm decent at it, like I can connect with people and I can help them see. I think that the thing I get most excited about is helping other people see the fullest version of themselves. So same thing with my students. I see this with founders that we work with. And again, removing the things that keep them from being who they could be And I felt like divinely called into this. It wasn't something necessarily that I was like, I was a little bit scared, resistant, hesitant, but it was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I went for it and invested everything I had.
Mm.
And it's been it's been hard and it's been spectacular.
So true entrepreneur is jumping into the unknown, taking a risk. It's really what I think separates entrepreneurs from the rest of us, that willingness to venture into areas that are unpredictable, uncertain, where there's significant personal and financial risk and potential for gain too. So what was your vision for Microschool Solutions in those early days?
I really wanted founders who had their own vision to I, that's one of the things that most people come in with is a vision, but there's like, because they've come to this place for a reason, and that reason is driving that vision, generally speaking, whether it's their own children, their educators, like whatever the reason is. There's so many, and they may know pieces of what to do, but there's so much to the puzzle of putting together a micro school. And so being able to say, tell me everything you already know, and I'll help you fill in the gaps on the rest, and you create the micro school that is the micro school of your dreams without anyone else's like input parameters.
Mm.
And then we will continue to support you throughout your process. Like we want to get you ready and then continue to walk with you down the road, because I think week 2 is probably the scariest. Like because you're actually in it, and it isn't, people aren't then done. Like we help people start their micro schools, but once you've started, that's when you're like, oh, these are all the things that I need to adjust, do differently, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So really it was about helping founders bring their own vision to life in a really powerful way with the resources they need. And I think bringing confidence is probably one of the most valuable things we do. We're just like, you've got this, like you definitely can do this. They need to hear that from somebody over and over and over again until the day they open. And then the day after they open, it's like, you've got this.
Yeah, they still need that support. So did you have a sense, when you first sort of hung up your shingle for Microschool Solutions, that there was demand for this? Or, what was your sense of the market for a program like yours? And what did you find in the early days?
I assumed that we would need to do some educating. Like that, I didn't think that we would find a lot of people that were like already ready to go. That we would need to help people understand that this is an option. I also, one of the things that drives me is finding opportunities to make this not cost anything to parents. If we can find ways to make this tuition free to parents, that's really, really valuable. And so obviously ESAs do that. In states that don't have ESAs, one of the things that I am always trying to figure out is what are other ways that we can access funding, whether it's public or otherwise, to help people do this. So what I thought was we would need to educate. What I found is it's explosive right now. It's exponential and it's explosive, and it's shocking to me. We do something we call the Microschool Dream Summit. It's a free webinar that 2 hours. Iman Eileen from Kind Academy joins us. Yes Legal is sometimes on there with us, and just kind of walk people in 2 hours through what is a microschool and how do you do it. And we've had some of those where we've had, and we're doing Facebook ads. We've had 160 people register, for one of those, and about 20% of them show up. And I looked at one time, they came from 41 states. So what I'm finding is that this is universal. I also am finding that probably at least 50% of our attendees are women of color, people of color, but particularly women of color. And so it's just, when I look at Dream Summit data as we're doing these ads, it really helps me see like what's happening broadly in the interest level in the movement. And one of the questions we ask is like, put a 1 if you're already running a micro school, 2 if you're planning to open, 3 if you're just here to learn. And it's usually 50-50 between 2s and 3s. Like, so there's a lot of people who are like, I'm going to do this. And then some are like, I didn't even, like, I talked to a woman in Oklahoma and she heard about the idea. We talked a week later and she's like, I'm in. And as far as I know, she's planning to open in January. So for a lot of people, the ground is really fertile. And it's the thing they've been building in their head for the last 20 years as they have been totally unsatisfied in what they can deliver to kids in a classroom. And all of a sudden, there's an opportunity.
And there's the support structure in place. So for the prospective founders that come to you that team up with Microschool Solutions, what does that process look like?
So we want to make sure we've identified 10 mindsets, characteristics, skills that we have seen are universal in really rock star microschool founders. And so a personal assessment where we walk through with them and it's like, where are you in these things? Lifelong learner, curiosity versus judgment, shared power. Like, are you a dominant, like, do you feel like you need to dominate kids and make all the decisions? Those kinds of things. So we walk through who they are as a human. And then it's like, what do you already have? Because we talk about a microschool needing 5, there's lots of puzzle pieces, but they fall into 5 categories for the most part. Funding's sort of a 6th category, but it's vision, space, students, an adult in the room, and what are you learning and how are you learning it? Which I avoid the term curriculum because once I say that, people are like a set of textbooks or an online tool. And it's more like, what's your learning philosophy? Like, how do you best want kids to learn? And then you fit the curriculum into that, not kind of the other direction. But so we assess, where are you in those 5 things? And then walk through, Tom Bogle, he does what we call the Microschool Blueprint, which is a spin-off of the Model Business Canvas, and really help people see a big picture of what does me starting a micro school with my vision and what I already have, how far am I in that journey and how much help do I need? And then we do weekly cohort meetings and one-on-one coaching just to sort of like, and some people, the cohort meetings are the things that mean the most to them, and some people one-on-one coaching. And so just sort of like, we call that program the kitchen sink. That was a working title that we just stuck with. And it's like, everything you need to start a micro school is in either us or the resources that we give you. And I love what we do.
Yeah, and you have sort of different payment tiers. If a prospective founder wants the kitchen sink, wants all of those resources and that hand holding, that's one price, and then you sort of go down from there. Can you give us a sense of what the general range is in terms of pricing?
Yeah. So if it's not the kitchen sink, it's more one-on-one coaching and access to sort of a la carte resources. The kitchen sink, we've given it a couple of options, and one is pay for it up front. It's very discounted, and so the program is $7,500. If you can pay for it up front, it's $5,000. And it took us a long time, and I think it was fear on our part to figure out a way to actually support founders, that most founders, because we made a decision not to offer a delayed payment when we first started the company. And so all the founders we were helping we had gotten a couple of grants. So they were grant supported, almost all the founders that we had. And so the grant was covering the cost of our program. And what I realized is I need to take a risk on founders. They're taking a risk on themselves. And so there is risk. So we have 2 ways to do a delayed payment, where they come to us, we get them ready, we're in a contract, and when they start, they can either pay us $750 a month over 10 months, or similar to kind of KaiPod Catalyst, it's 10% of revenue. We do it a little bit differently. It's over 3 years. We offer a buyout after year 1, because there are a lot of people that are going to be really successful and need the help to get started, but there's no reason in those following years, I don't need to continue to take 10% of their revenue. And so, and we actually use KaiPod's platform for the financial part with our founders. So there's just some, I'm really excited about what we are offering in terms of, because I've had people who are like, I can't believe I can get all this help and I don't need to come in up front.
Yeah.
And they're just so grateful
Yeah.
because most people, if they have capital, they need it to open their micro school. Like they need a space and they need rugs and hopefully beanbags and not desks, in my opinion, but things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and to come up with 5,000 or $7,500 up front is a real challenge. So it's great that you're coming up with these creative ways, although it sounds like they get a huge return on that investment
Mhm.
going forward. Rachelle, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've noticed in the founders that you've worked with as they get going?
Uh, it depends on the founder. It really depends on where that initial puzzle that we talk about. For a lot of founders, it's finding students, but that's not true of everyone because some people are starting it because they've had families come to them and say, can you do this? Space can be really challenging, but if you're in a state, you can do it in your home and want to do it in your home or have a church that you're associated with. So I would say all of the challenges. And then if you're in a non-ESA state, it's how do I fund it? Like, what do I do to be sustainable? I think probably the biggest challenge, if I had to, as I'm meandering through this question, it's founders valuing themselves enough to pay themselves so that they can be sustainable. I think that if I had to like there's all these other things, but all of the rest of it is sort of rooted in, do I see myself as worth it?
Yeah,
That's because as educators, we've sort of been trained to believe that we are giving souls, generally speaking. That's, we go into education and there's sort of this, whether it's societally put on us or coming from our own struggles with our own worth, value, those kinds of things. It's being able to say, I am worth this and my program is worth this.
I think that's so true. And I think that to your point, is in education, it's sort of one of those rare sectors where an entrepreneur won't think about that first, right? That if an entrepreneur is running any other kind of business, they're thinking about a path to financial sustainability. And somehow
Totally. Yes.
that's sort of
Nobody's like, how can I help the world and hope I can eat? Like, that's not the entrepreneurial way of being.
right, right. Yeah. So you then decided this year to launch your own microschool. It quickly filled up to, again, about a dozen students, mixed age, one-room schoolhouse kind of model in your home in Mesa. I know when I visited again, the students just seemed so delighted to be there. I met one of your teachers, your co-teachers, who is a retired public school teacher who just thinks the world of this model. I had a chance to talk with her, just the two of us, and she was just talking about how it's such a different model and such a better model than what she experienced as a teacher. And you're also seeing some profound impacts with the students in your program, even though the year has really just begun. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing.
Um, well, first I'll say it just takes love. Like that's, I have a 6-year-old, though he's 7, a 7-year-old boy that hates school. And it's because he hates not knowing how to do something. He's very competitive and he knows he's loved and it like he's willing to stretch a little bit. And it's about finding what they want. If I turn something into a competition for him in some way, then he's very excited. We're doing some language stuff and he's like, yes, if you said, do you like to read? It's like, no, I have no interest in that. But just yesterday I was talking to his mom when she picked him up and she's like, he's starting to point out things on signs and, like the carryover is happening outside of school. I think one of the kids I'm most excited about, I have a 13-year-old in my class that comes from a really, really large family. And I think that he was in a micro school that a friend of mine ran back in 2020. And I think it was the first and only time in his life that the adults in his world saw him as a positive. He sort of spent his life being seen as a problem. He's one of the smartest kids I've ever met. He reads and does math at like a first or second grade level. And I'm watching what happens when a kid feels that someone is valuing them, and like it's game changing. If you can help a kid see that they have value, um, I don't know. I could talk about every one of my kids and the things they're doing. Like I told you this, I'm using like an old math curriculum from the 60s that uses Cuisenaire rods. And because I've decided at this point, I don't know if I'll stay this way, to do all the academics offline, which makes it a lot harder for me. Like the amount of work that goes into that is greatly increased. I recognize that, especially because I have 5 to 14-year-olds
Mm.
and meeting all of those needs. But I'm loving what they're getting. And one of the things that, and you saw this, that I love the most is we don't have whiteboards in my house. We have a whole bunch of windows. They're so excited. We do math on my windows and it's like the coolest thing. But I'm watching them be excited about the academics. They got really excited about the school because we do things like they can bring a pocket knife and whittle in their free time. They're doing things that make them very excited to be at school. The thing that I've seen since you were here is they're starting to get excited about doing the academics as well. Not every day and not every kid, but being in an environment they're happy in. And because I think the academics are so threatening because they're judged on them. Kids are judged on their academic ability. And a lot of these kids I'm still figuring out, I think there's some dyslexia in some places. I think and there's just places where they have not found success. And so they have shut down. Brene
Mm.
Brown talks about her all the time. And so creating enough emotional safety that they know that it's okay to fail has made them more inclined to want to try and be interested. And, I had one of the girls in my class the other day during free time, she's like, can I do math? I'm like, yep. and starting to see that stuff, seeing them, just because they're not afraid, like learning, sorry, I'm really rambly right now, but the problem is we define learning very differently in the traditional model than what learning actually is. There are lots of kids that go to school and never actually learn anything because they already knew it. And so they haven't learned anything, or they never learn anything because they're behind what's being taught. And so being able to be exactly where they are, we talked about the proximal zone of learning and all those things. It really does open them up to a willingness for risk. Like that's what this is about. It's how much risk is a kid willing to take? And if there are negative consequences to them taking risk, they will stop doing it. And so we're removing the risk in them trying things that they may not be good at.
Yeah, and that home-based environment, I think, really facilitates that risk-taking because it is so calm and nurturing and so different from a conventional classroom. So they're just not
Maybe
stressed.
I wouldn't say calm. I wouldn't call my microschool calm, but
Well,
yes, like in that.
lively, but
Yeah.
peaceful in a
Mhm.
way that I think a conventional classroom isn't. They're just not on high alert in your micro
Yes.
school the way they might be elsewhere, where they are feeling constantly judged and where there is this sort of top-down expectation of you need to be at this place at this time. And that, to your point, they may not be there. They may be ahead, they may be behind, and those individualized needs aren't being met in the same way they are with a micro school. And so, what has your experience now being a micro school founder done for your perspective as someone who's helping others to found
I am, I
micro
am,
schools?
I felt like I did my job pretty well, up until this point. I feel like I'm exponentially better at it because I know all the feelings. I know all of the fears. I know all of the excitements. I know all of the um and being able to walk somebody down the road of there's a pretty good chance you're going to feel this or see this or need this, or in a way that I have a confidence in that I didn't as much because I had subbed, like 2019 I subbed in a there were only 3 Prenda micro schools at the time, and I did a long-term sub for 6 weeks with fifth and sixth grade boys. That was the moment that, like, those 6 weeks changed my life because I saw what can happen when kids are in an environment that like this. Like that was the moment for me that has driven all of this. And yeah, I I feel what the founders are feeling, and just being able to be like, right around the corner, you're going to see this. Or
Yeah.
um and some of it's hard, some of it's like you're, whether it's parent stuff or kids that are struggling. Anyway, it's just having a deeper understanding of
Yeah.
what they're feeling.
Yeah, walking in their shoes and doing the work. And I would imagine too that the founders you're working with really appreciate that insight that you bring too. So you talked a little bit about accessibility. I'd love to dive into that a bit more. Of the dozen students in your micro school in your home, all of them are attending tuition free through Arizona's ESA, Education Savings Account program, that enables a portion of state allocated education funding to go toward the educational option that the family chooses.
Mhm.
How important is accessibility to you and to the families you serve?
It's everything. Because there's uh, the kids that need it the most tend to have the least amount of access, generally speaking, in our world. I was talking to a woman that wants to start a micro school in Colorado, who had always been in Title I schools and this year isn't. And she's like, I had no idea what was available to kids in schools, in non-Title I schools. Like she was shocked by the difference, by the disparity. And so I think the same thing happens here. If we can't have accessibility, financial accessibility, we can't meet the needs of the kids that need it the most. That, and it's primarily kids of color. You talked about urban areas, and there's a huge segment of our population that is being not only not served, but deeply harmed by the traditional model. I talk about this a lot. I'm like, we have one system, and there are variations, and they are beautiful, but they are few and far between. But we basically and it's private, public, and charter in a lot of situations. And it's same age group, 20 kids, grade level content. Adult is making all the decisions. That's what, when I talk about traditional, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And we put every single kid in this. And then we're like, broken kid, broken kid, broken kid, broken kid. And it's like, no, that child was whole when you got them, and you broke them in a way that they are going to have consequences for the rest of their life, or until they do enough therapy to recover from it. It's like, we don't have to break these kids. We just need to create a system that supports them where they are. And when you we were talking about emotional safety earlier, they can't learn in survival mode, that science has told us. And so I don't know what the percentage of students in public school are in survival mode on a daily basis, but then we have the expectation that, or we put it on them. It's like, what's wrong with you? It's like, well, you put me in a scientifically proven impossible situation, and then you held me responsible for it as a child. Like, how can we do that?
So do you think the future is micro, Rochelle? I guess where do you think we're going in education?
I don't know what will happen, because some of the most powerful entities in the world really want the system to stay the way it is. Like the status quo serves a lot of people really well, not kids, but other organizations. And so I think it's going to be a battle. I think there's going to be a fight. I also think it depends on, my brain's 100 directions. So re-ask the question if I get off track. But one thing I think it depends on is the school choice movement it's a political conversation in a lot of, it's sort of like a right and left thing. And the idea is that school choice is a right issue, a conservative issue. I have a lot of people who lean very left in their ideology and really need school choice. And so, Alabama just passed a law that's going to start in 2025, and it's a good law. Like, the law is solid, And I was talking to a woman that runs the Alabama Policy Institute. And there's a woman who is in Birmingham that's about to start a micro school in January. We're starting our new cohort for January tonight. And she's a Black woman who is a rock star. I mean, just a powerhouse. And seeing what she will do for her community and other people, who she will be able to like be the model and help other people do this. And then I'm talking to Stephanie at Alabama Policy and saying, how important would it be to have 10 Black founders in the state of Alabama bring their students to their Congress and say, this is not an upper class white benefit, which is how school choice is seen. And so I think we have to be able to continue to open doors for people and then tell those stories so that the people who are opposed to school choice as this is something that's only benefiting one segment of the population, that they see that that's not true. I think that's critical. If we can do that, the reason I see micro as the answer is everyone's like, there's no such thing as one size fits all. I think the movement can be one size fits all because every micro school offers something different. And so if you get enough micro schools in a space, there's going to be a micro school for every kid. I had a woman visit my micro school, potentially to have her child join. Her child isn't verbal at all, uses a machine, can't speak, uses a machine to speak. And we talked about, could I accommodate? That child needs a lot of structure. That's not my strong point. Anyway, she reached out to me a few days later and she said, I'm going to start my own micro school and I'm going to make it exactly what my child needs. And I was like, if I can have people come see my micro school and be like, I can do this, that's like the biggest success ever.
Yes.
And that made me so excited.
If you can't find it, build it. And more people are doing that, and you're helping to support that, Rachelle. So you mentioned you have a new cohort starting. If my listeners and viewers want to join one of your cohorts, want to find out more about the services that Microschool Solutions offers, what is the best way for them to do that?
So I do a 30-minute, like just free conversation. And I can give you the link. It's microschool-solutions.dreamconversation. I'll get that to you. And we come on a Zoom and I say, tell me everything you want to know about yourself and what you want to do. And they share with me the dream, and then I just reflect back anything that I can bring of value to them in resources, in ideas, in questions and thoughts, and just help them sort of clarify, and then we go from there.
And the website, your general website for people to visit is microschool-solutions.com. So excited for not only your individual microschool, Rachelle, but for all of the microschools that you're helping to develop and expand across the country. So best wishes to you, and thank you so much for being on the LiberatED podcast.
Thank you for having me.